Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Event Industry News podcast, where we uncover the ideas, the tech that's shaping the future of live, virtual and hybrid experiences. In this episode, we're going to be talking about neuroscience and engagement and how we can design events that resonate with our audience on those principles. We're diving deep into the brain science behind memorable moments, meaningful connections and measurable impact. Joining me today is Lisa Schulteis, a powerhouse in event strategy with a background that blends neuropsychology, which I'm really excited to get into with you, event production, thought leadership on neurodiversity and sustainability. And in full transparency, we've had Lisa speak at both Event Tech Live and Event Sustainability Live many, many times. Fantastic speaker. That's the pitch. There we go. We've got that out of the way. Lisa's also worked across the industry on pretty much every type of format that you can think of. You know, intimate C-suite retreats, events with thousands of attendees, and she's always bringing a brain-first approach to how she designs her sessions and how we design events for attention, emotion, and memory. So in the next 30 minutes, we're going to impact a ton of stuff. Lisa will show us how brain-friendly design dovetails to inclusivity, sustainability in surprising and powerful ways. So get ready for a science-backed, action-ready packed strategy session that you can apply immediately, whether you're building your next breakout session or the whole event from start to finish. Lisa, thank you very much for joining me on the Event Industry News podcast.
Thank you. I'm always excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, this is kind of like a self-indulgent kind of podcast for me, because I always super enjoy talking to you. We always have great chats offline, and I always find your sessions, I have to watch your sessions back on replay most of the time because I don't get the freedom to come and sit in them at Event Tech Live or Event Sustainability Live, but they're always packed sessions. So I'm kind of like looking forward to having that moment, which generally happens at the end of a session, which the questions come. So I've got like all these questions I want to ask you about neuroscience and engagement and what that means. But let's start off with your roots, because where did those start? It was all around kind of the background in neuropsychology, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so straight out of college, actually, I started working at a facility in Chicago in the US, and I was working as a neuropsychology technician and working with Alzheimer's patients. And we were actually doing research with them. So measuring their cognitive ability, measuring anything from, daily life skills, all of those things, and really determining where they were in the process and what we could do to help, and transitioned over to a rehab setting and started working with traumatic brain injury patients, so stroke patients, car accident patients. That one was a little bit easier. It was in a rehab setting, so most of them got well, right? Alzheimer's, unfortunately, we go the other direction. But really measuring, how, their attention was and attention lapses, memory encoding, problem solving capabilities, what they could understand, how they could understand it, right? And how they could relay information. So when I moved into events, it was a really easy way for me to marry the two worlds that I love, right, of neuropsychology and events. And I realized that, it's the same brain circuits that are at play. And conferences overload our prefrontal cortex, forgettable slide decks, they don't engage the hippocampus, right? All of those different things that we're doing. So I began translating kind of those clinical insights, like how novelty boosts neuroplasticity, I can't talk today apparently, into session formats and into event formats and room layouts and icebreakers and all of those things. So basically, in short, I evaluate every event like an environment for optimal brain function.
So, you mentioned short attention spans, and there's kind of all these stats and statistics about how long people can give something attention for. I mean, my wife seems to give her phone lots and lots of attention, so I'm not sure how much truth is in it, but I keep seeing this figure of like 20 minutes. Is there truth in that? What's the science say when it comes to people's attention?
Yeah, it's right around that 18-20 minute point, right, that we start losing attention. And So it's really important to, one, realize that, and two, whether you're speaking from stage or you're presenting in a meeting or you're doing any other kind of event, to know that you've got to reset people and you've got to get their attention back, right? Because otherwise they just start fading out on you. You'll see people start picking up their phones, right? Because the phones, we give our phones a lot of attention, right? But it doesn't mean that we're actually processing a whole lot, right? It's kind of, as I'm going through my different social media feeds, I'm scanning, right? I'm not totally paying attention to it, right? It's kind of like background noise.
Yeah.
So we have to, in whatever we're doing in an event, we have to do something to bring that back. And one of the things that we talk about with that is pattern interrupts. And I know you and I are going to be talking about pattern interrupts, but it's really important to bring those in so that we get people's attention back.
Could you give some examples of some like true tried and tested pattern interrupts, something that you kind of use as part of your repertoire to keep people engaged?
Yeah. You can do things that are very, very simple, and you can do things that are much more complicated. So a simple one that I will do is if I'm on a stage that has the really large screens, right? Rear projection, really large screens. My slide backgrounds tend to be black because I don't want to have this glaring white giant screen in front of people. So my slides tend to be black. And every few slides, I will actually throw in a white background slide. Nobody ever notices it, but their brain notices it, right? Because it's something different, and it causes the brain to stop for a second, reset, and be like, wait, this looks different. So you can do something as simple as that. You can play with lighting to do that as well. But you can also do things like, stop in the middle and be like, stop and turn to the person next to you and share what's one insight that you've already picked up, or share with them, one thing that you don't quite understand here, and let's start talking about those things. So it's kind of that stop and reset. The best one I've ever seen, and I'm not telling you have to do this, is I was actually an attendee, and the speaker was talking about being memorable, right? So people don't forget you. And the next thing we know, we had a marching band marching through the room, playing a song long enough that they marched in and marched out, right? It was like 10, 11 years ago. I'll never forget it, right? It was a memorable pattern interrupt. So you can do little things, you can do big things, but it's just that something different to reset their attention and reset their brain.
So what we're kind of doing there is we're kind of thinking about people's senses, multisensory, visual, sound, sight, snapping them back into the room, because we've both seen it, haven't we? We've been speakers at so many of these events. People they're not being rude, they just naturally drift, pick their phone up, because it's funny, isn't it? We now, I think we're kind of baked into, when we're actually in the middle of something, we can still get our phone out and kind of take a look at it and scroll emails and things like that. And we're not quite in the room, like you said before, but we're kind of there. We're kind of and this is all my big thing about the forgetting curve and our retention of information as well. And wow, so many people go away from these sessions actually remembering so little for them. But it's interesting that you're giving these tactics out, and you've employed these tactics just to keep people super engaged. Thinking about the organizer as well, we've talked there about speakers, and I would love to have the budget to bring in a brass band maybe after every couple of sessions, keeping people in the room. But what can the organizer potentially do to also support speakers and the attendees to maintain that concentration and keep the brain switched on, do you think?
It's really important for organizers and speakers to have that conversation, right? We are all used to, I refer to, and I am a speaker, so I can say it. I refer to speakers as talking heads, right? We stand up on stage and it's like, it's the Charlie Brown thing, right? Wah, 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 wah. So having that conversation with the speakers, a lot of the events that I work on, we will talk to the speakers and say, what format are you offering this in, right? So we have kind of the traditional, we have our keynotes, we have our panels, we have our solo presentations, but even within those, what is that interaction? What is that engagement going to look like, right? Keynotes, there's not going to be any, right? They're going to stand on stage, they're going to tell their inspirational story. People are going to love it. We'll go with it. But when we start looking at panel discussions, when we start looking at solo presentations, we'll work with our speakers to say, okay, are you, is this just you standing on stage with, slide decks, or are you offering something where you're going to, keep stopping and doing a workshop style, right? Even a mini workshop style. Are you going to be doing interactive Q&A during the panel, not at the end, right? Are you going to be doing polls? Are you going to be doing these different things? Because we want to not only engage with people in these sessions, but we want to have each session feel a little bit different, right? So we don't want people to start skipping the afternoon sessions because it's just one more session that they're just going to be sitting there listening to a talking head. So we want to look at how we can bring in these different formats. So I'll even do, in mine, I'll do like a mini workshop where I put something up on the screen. I'm like, okay, get out your paper and pen. Let's start working through this as I'm talking. So it's anything that you can do to kind of change that up, and you have to work with your speakers to make sure that you can do that.
Yeah. I'd love to get your idea on kind of I'm going to use the word gamification as well of sessions. I think people interacting with them, and that for me goes a little bit beyond kind of like, answering a poll or a quiz, something a little bit more neuro-intensive, maybe a little bit. Maybe there's a competition element to it. We're getting people competing in the room a little bit as well. Like, what's your thoughts around those kind of tactics as well as a speaker or an organizer to get people kind of thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that you can do to get them moving and to get them thinking, right? So if we're talking during a session, you can always do some kind of gamification during the session. You can do gamification even on the floor, right? If you're doing a trade show, and that's the fun thing and the hard thing, right? There's so many different types of events. So you can get creative in whatever you're doing. So, even if we're talking about, maybe an exhibit floor, typical gamification, typical engagement, right, is, connect with as many people as you can and you'll get a point, and then we have this big prize at the end. And the problem then is you just have the people that want the prize, and then they start spamming everybody, and then everybody's annoyed and nobody wants to do the gamification. If you can start rewarding them for micro behaviors, right? So I always tell people, think of, the Disney pin trading, right? People get so excited. I would say that they actually are almost obsessive about, do I have this pin yet, right? I have to trade it with this person. If you can bring something in like that to your event, so, maybe you have a sticker or a pin or whatever it may be, a micro reward for they have visited 3 booths, right? Or they asked a question during a session, or, they did complete a poll, right? But let's make it a reward for them where it's just those quick wins, those quick micro rewards.
Yeah.
Those will convert better for you. And, we all have egos too. So anytime you can put a leaderboard up where people can see it publicly, whether it's a display on the floor, whether it's in the app, whatever it may be, projecting those real-time kind of top contributors or top winners, people are super competitive, and we're all egotistical when it comes to that. So anything that you could do like that as well to reward people, and it's such a micro reward, but it really can make an effect.
Yeah, I'll have to give a shout out to an event that I went to earlier in the year, and I'd love to talk about some of these events that you've been to or been at as a speaker that's also done things like this. Went to an event called Rain Focus Insight at the beginning of the year. They partnered with a company called Como, who are like an engagement platform, and lots of their sessions were break-off. So they kind of bring people together for a kind of a keynote or something like that, and then allow people to kind of go into those sessions where they could do a little bit more deep dive on very specific things in smaller groups things. But often I think, bringing those people back, especially after things like breaks and lunches and stuff like that, and getting them fired up and kind of back in the rooms, kind of really challenging. Now, Rain Focus had 2 of their team that did a fantastic job of being the EMCs for the event, but they really leveraged that technology to get people like back engaged. And you could just feel the change in energy when we played a game. I think one of the games was like matching pairs, and they got like team faces and things like that up. And that was competitive because everybody was like trying to get the fastest things so they could like get the top of the leaderboard. And I'm not going to lie, I tried that, I think 5 times or something like that. Didn't get to the top. But that just step change, I think, again, is one of those tactics around how people's brains work and things like that. Just getting some competition going, get some energy going, something fun, and then going into the content actually brought people in the content wide awake and eyes open, rather than the session start and people being like, you know, when you start first running and you kind of like, you're kind of not warmed up or anything, and you kind of like, oh, this first 5 minutes is really hard. They were kind of getting people past that before whoever was doing the next big session kind of really went into their presentation. And I think the other speakers really kind of appreciated that, because the audience was warmed up rather than them having to try and warm them up as well. Is there any other examples that you've got of, and you've given us some fantastic stuff already, like the brass band and stuff like that, but is there any other examples of, you know, other events that were really well designed and clearly got like the neuroscience of attendance, like, right?
Yeah, there's a few, and I think what we're starting to see is a lot of events are starting to get a little piece here and a little piece here, right? That they're doing really, really well. And because it takes time to incorporate all this, we know that, right? But one of the you know, and some people call it an event, some people call it a show. I actually will call it both. I'm a huge sporting fan, so name sport, I'm going to be interested in it. But I love baseball here in the U.S. And there is an exhibition team called the Savannah Bananas. And if you haven't heard of them and Jesse Cole, just go Google it right now. Start watching videos on YouTube and you will be amazed. So what they do, they are an exhibition. They're a minor league team, but they've gotten really good at full fan experience. So they do, before every game, right, they're doing full-on tailgate parties outside of the park. There's a parade with all of the players, right? During the game, you almost don't know where to watch because there's a real baseball game happening, right? But you almost don't know where to watch because all of a sudden, third base coach is starting to, you know, dance at the base, right? There's a player that's on stilts that somehow plays this ball game. I have no idea how. They have everybody in between the innings standing up and you know, they teach the motions to Hey Baby, and my, you know, 84-year-old mother who would never ever dance in public is sitting here doing the motions and dancing to Hey Baby. So they do a lot with multisensory, with color, with music. They do a lot with they're really good at social bonding, like almost to the cult extent, like the good cult extent, right? On-field fan interactions, instant small prizes, again, those small rewards. And it's like 4 hours of this intense interaction with them. And it's so funny because Jesse's book that he wrote, which is Fans First, he wrote it from a marketing perspective. Okay. And this is how you interact with people. This is how you market to people. But if you read the book, it's like, it's so good on the neuroscience side of it as well. And I don't think he knows that. So it's just, they've done such a good job of engagement, of interaction, of making people feel not only special, but like they're part of this family and this experience. And when we can do that at an event, our NPS ratings are going to be off the scale.
Yeah, it really sounds they got like nailed that, like that entire journey of that fan, right, from start to finish. And how can we surprise and delight them at every stage? How can we get them interacting with each other? Because the basics of it are like, we, you know, you mentioned cult there, but we love that intimacy, don't we, of community and people and seeing friends and old colleagues or finding new kindred spirits and things like that. And, you know, when it comes to sport, people are super passionate about it anyway, kind of thing, but they become families of families, don't they? And things like that. And people get married through these things and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot we can learn.
Where else can you go to see dad bod cheerleaders? Like,
Yeah,
So
the rugby club,
but
maybe. I
seriously,
don't know.
I mean, it's one of the reasons we all love live events, right?
Yeah.
Virtual events still have a great place in our industry.
Yeah.
They can be used for very specific things, but we still love live events. It is the reason I get on a plane every November and come to London, right? It is that family, right? It is that interaction. It is that I want to be with these people that are like me, and I want to have these shared experiences. And, when we have these shared experiences, it's called memory mapping. If I see you smile at me, I'm going to smile back in most cases, right? Unless I'm having some really crazy bad day. But when we have these shared experiences, we're mapping those experiences together. And that's releasing all these amazing chemicals for us. It makes us feel good. We want to repeat it. And in events, we want our attendees to want to repeat this experience.
Yeah.
We want them back.
Let's flip it for a second, because we know while all of those are amazingly good things to implement and repeat and replicate, there's going to be some things that you see time and time again that are the kind of the classic event design choices that actually work against the event organizer, or maybe the speaker does and it works against the audience. Like, what are some of those things that really actually don't engage people and possibly send them the other way and switch them off?
Yeah. So one of them we kind of talked about a little bit, when we walk into a room and it's just like endless seats of theater row seating, right? And it is that talking head of here's the slides and here's your talk, and especially the slides that aren't visual, right? They have 50,000 words on them in 8-point font that none of us can read. It overloads your attention with no relief, and it just starves your social circuits. So that's one thing. So looking at how you're setting up stages is really important. And again, talking with your speakers as to what that interaction and what that presentation is going to look like is really important, because otherwise it can just kind of kill the mood, right? Another one is fluorescent lighting and nonstop background music. We're all going into these convention centers. Some of them still have lighting from the 70s, right? They're just this horrible, horrible glare, nothing exciting. It's why you'll see with AV production, you'll see up lights on the stage, and the AV production teams are coming in and putting in different lighting, because that fluorescent lighting and that nonstop background music, it just, especially even during breaks, people are like, oh, this is a great thing to do during the break. It elevates your cortisol levels, and elevated cortisol levels actually leave people more anxious than energized. So you're sending them on this break, you think you're doing this great thing, and you're actually making them more anxious. So those are just a couple of things. We could go down the list there for hours.
Let's not turn it into a rant, but yeah, it's really very much like stimulation's good in certain environments and certain doses, but nobody enjoys being overstimulated.
Correct.
And again, overstimulation is not like immediately over, in your face for the moment in time, like a big siren going off or some, brass band, for example, coming out. Yes, that's loud and it's brash and it's in your face, but that doesn't necessarily overstimulate people. It's actually sometimes, isn't it, the small things compounding on each other over a long period of time that then gets to the end, like somebody's been standing in a trade show for 6 hours, and that, like you say, that repeating music going off in the background, and that's the bit that sends them over the edge. Is like, I've been listening to this for 6 hours. Like,
right. Well, and the other thing too is, you have to remember every single attendee that is coming to your event is wired differently.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you might be able to segment them. You might be able to group them into buckets where you've got most of them in a bucket. But every single person is still coming in with their own history, their own emotions, their own memories, their own brain. And so that overstimulation, I tell people all the time, I can fake it all day long. I will be on that trade show floor. I will be smiling. I will be talking to people. I will be having a great time. And then I go back to my hotel and I hide. And it's really hard to get me to an evening event if I have been on the floor all day, because I am emotionally exhausted. I'm an introvert. Nobody ever believes me, but I am emotionally exhausted at the end of the day. And so I have to go and retreat and recharge. And so we have to build that piece in too, of different people react different ways. And it's why it's really important that we have a lounge on the floor. You know, the lounge in the middle of the floor is great, but also give me one off in a corner somewhere. Because if you haven't, I'm going to go find a corner which might be off your floor. And that's the worst thing, right? So give me a lounge that's in the corner that's just a little bit quieter, where I can just recharge, right? But then you have the people that, man, they just thrive on it, right? So you have to account for those people too. And then, you know, we have other people that maybe they're somewhere in the middle. So we have to be able to design these events, from the sessions that we're providing to the floor experience to the floor design, to be able to accommodate all of these different brains that we have on the floor.
And what's your advice there? Just thinking about not speakers for a second, but organisers, like, you know, there's only so much that you can glean from your audience to try and design the event in a way that's accessible and inclusive for as many people as you can cater for. And obviously there's certain events that they're just bigger events, so they have bigger budgets, so they can put these special locations in place for people to be able to walk away from the trade show floor and take time out and things like that, or provide various different accessibility elements or feature designs and things like that. But is there anything, or what's your advice around, because obviously you run shows yourself for the events industry and help build them, like, what are some of those things that, if you don't have the big budgets for some of these things, that you think are the really good quick win kind of strategies to kind of provide some level of inclusivity to people?
Yeah, there's a lot of small things that you can do. You know, obviously, you know, with the big budgets, you can do a lot more. But again, just, you know, one, the way that your floor is laid out. You know, if you're going to put 2 lounges on the floor, put one in the middle, put one off in the back corner, right? Which the back corner one's great too, because then that encourages people to kind of walk back to these poor exhibitors that signed up at the last minute and you put in the back corner, or that for some reason chose it back there. But I mean, you know, just floor layout of how you can, you know, really lay that out. You know, seating's really interesting too. I like to mix up seating if I can. And one of the best examples I saw of this actually was at Experiential Marketing Summit a couple months ago in Vegas. That one of their main floor stages, they had, you know, a few rows of theater seating in the front, but then they also, on the outskirts of it, had little round cocktail tables with like 2-3 seats next to them. And then on the outskirts of that, they had highboy bar tables, so you could sit 2 people. They were rectangular. You could sit 2 people at them, and they were angled at the stage. So if somebody really needed to work, I actually had something I had to get out deadline-wise that day. I was able to sit at the bar table, work on my computer, and still watch the session, versus the people that really knew that they wanted 100% to pay attention to the session, right? I needed about 80%, because it was a really good session. They sat up front in the theater seating, and then the people that just wanted a little bit of a break, they sat back a little bit, right? So they mixed up the seating, and people were able to go and choose what they were comfortable with, which is amazing, right? And I'm a big advocate. I get a lot of blowback on this, and I don't know why. I tell people all the time, I'm like, I'd love to see some beanbags on that floor too. Beanbags, I'm on the floor.
Beanbags are the way forward. I've got 2 examples that's relevant to this. So I went to an event here in the UK just last week called NHS ComFed. They'd installed this big LED screen that was an overflow area, but it got information and intelligence around the entire event, like leaderboards and other contextual information. But then they had like 3 or 4 of the stages kind of in the screen, kind of, so people could put silent headsets on and kind of tune into that. It was packed. constantly as a location. And I think the organizer was like, definitely a sponsorship opportunity for somebody next year. But back to choice, I went to an awards program in Vegas one year, designed by a gentleman called Lenny Tallarico. I don't know whether you know Lenny. And what was beautiful about that event was there were the standard kind of roundtables where groups of people who would come together, and specifically more so those people that were probably up for the awards could sit closer to the stage, right in the thick of the action. Then behind that, there was various different seating options depending on who you were and how you were there, and it was all free open. But they got like corner sofas, so you could sit with a group of friends and have more of a conversation and watch together. It was much more sociable than kind of all being sat in a row kind of thing. And then there were high bar tables that larger groups could sit back, and then there were kind of the smaller, more intimate kind of like poser cocktail tables with stools, or just people just stood up and stuff. And that for me was amazing, because actually, although you would think it would be chaos, people moving around during an award ceremony, it actually just meant everybody was just having a great time and kind of going and grabbing a drink and coming back and didn't feel like they were kind of interrupting things. The award program happened. And I think that was a really great way to give people choice about how they watched and enjoyed that show, right?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most important points that we can make here is we have to be able to give people choices. So many times at the events, we design for us.
Yeah.
Right? We design for us, and we design for our budget, and we want to fit these people in, and they just need to accept it, right? So we need to be able to give people choices, whether it's seating, whether it's feedback. So one of the things, and I don't even know if you know that you do this well. So Event Tech Live and Event Sustainability Live, for Q&A at the end of a session, people have a choice. They can either ask a question in the mic, or if they can scan the QR code and type their question in. That's such a great opportunity, right? Because the introverts in the world don't want the mic. They're going to put the text question in, right?
Yeah.
Some people think better when they speak. Some people think better when they type, and they can process that information through, so they can take a minute, right? So you're meeting two different communication styles there. Some people love to be in the limelight. They want to be on that microphone, right? So you're meeting people where they are with such a simple, inexpensive solution of, you have a choice. You can ask, raise your hand, we'll put you on the mic, or you can scan the QR code and type in your answer, right? And especially if you're doing a hybrid, then that also brings the virtual people in, that they can put their questions up there as well. And it's such a simple thing that you guys are doing there, but it makes a big impact. Yeah. So, it's just super easy to do. And then the other thing with choices, and whether it's a neurodiverse population or whether it's just you're trying to make things for all of your attendees better, clear signage, anything with senses in it. So let's say if you're using a smell, or let's say if you're doing lighting. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and there was lots of flashing lighting, and it was awesome. And we had all kinds of stuff going on the floor, but I'm like, oh man, if there's anybody that can't handle lighting and they don't know, right? They just walked into this room and they're about to be surprised, and it's not going to be a good experience for them. Yeah. So communication is huge, whether it's signage, whether it's sending a message in the app saying, hey, we're having this award show. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be pumped full of energy. It's going to be exciting, but please be aware that we will have a lot of moving lights. And if you're sensitive to that, you might want to sit in this part of the room, or whatever that situation may be. So just that communication for people is really, really important as well. And again, giving people choices, giving them the opportunity to choose how they want to interact and how they want to engage.
I think that's some amazing advice there. But I think it kind of brings me on to my next question, because we've kind of covered off kind of like how people think, and maybe neurodiversity and making events inclusive and things like that. And I think what I see a lot of people have nailed down is like how they design an event for maybe like executives or more creative people. Like IMEX is a fantastic example of that. They have, the trade show floor with all of these great exhibitors doing business, doing that kind of stuff. and then they have this whole other experience environment that's just designed in a totally different way, probably more for the creative, more expressive people that want to interact with an event, or mix up their experience so it's not just one dimensional. But first timers is one of those things that I feel like we've never got right. I see so many other events try so many different things for first timers. Like, how do you design that perfect first timer experience at an event? Because it's super, super daunting, especially if you're traveling on your own, right? You want to go to this event, but you're flying solo. You're a solo entrepreneur like yourself, Lisa. You want to meet people. You want to get the full experience. You want to get the maximum value out of the event. But then, you don't know anybody. You don't know where to go and how to do it. Like, if unlimited budget, what's the perfect first timer experience in your opinion?
All right. Well, first off, I don't think there is a perfect one. So we'll leave it there. But I think we can do a lot better. So yeah, first timers are a little bit of a challenge, but I think the most important thing, one, is to make them feel welcome. I think having, there's a lot of events that will have a first timers event right at the beginning of the show. But they're kind of boring. Like, you walk in the room and there's just a lot of people looking as confused and dazed as you are, right? So I think if you can have kind of this navigated, dedicated person that's going to interact with people, right? Greet them at the door, tell them to walk in, and this is the first thing that we want you to do. And that first thing we want to do needs to be some kind of interactive activation, something that they're doing. And then, having it be high energy, having it be super exciting. I went to one at an event a few months ago, and they had, music to pump everybody up and get them excited. And, they put a lot of energy behind it, which I think is really important. But then you also need to introduce people, and you need to connect with people. So a lot of events now pre-event, we all fill out the thing. Here's our interest, right? I'm interested in sustainability. I'm interested in networking. I'm interested in neuro-inclusivity. Having some of those stations where people can go up and have, meet other people that have the same interests, right? Don't make it a cocktail round. Again, throw a bunch of beanbags on the chair or on the floor, and get people working and talking together, or having places that they can write things down, ideas, and put them up on the board, or whatever it may be. And it's really going to depend on who your attendees are and what type of an event it is. Yes. Right? Yeah. So I can have the same group of attendees, but two different types of events, and I need to design those totally different. So if I'm even talking about executives, right? Sales executives, for example, the way I design an incentive and award trip is going to be totally different than the way I designed their sales kickoff 6 months later. Yeah. So when we're talking first-time attendees, whether we're talking established attendees, we have to look at who they are, what the goal of the event is, what that experience needs to be, but find a way to connect them. And find a way to introduce them to people that they have a shared experience with. Yeah. And I did a simple version of this when I was speaking at Northwest Event Show a few months ago. As everybody walked in the room, I just said, pick your favorite color Play-Doh from this bin. Everybody had a little Play-Doh can. And I used it during the presentation on neuroscience to prove 3 points. But the first one that I said was, everybody who picks purple, because I'm a purple person, hold up your purple Play-Doh, right? I was like, great, you 20 people already have something in common. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Everybody who picked green, you all have something in common already. So we can do things on such a small scale just to make that connection for them. And if we can connect them with people before they even get on the floor, they're going to have a much better experience once the event starts. Yeah, you're so right. It does really depend on what type of event you're producing and things like that, right? Because an internal event, even though you all maybe work for the same company, doesn't necessarily mean you know each other. You work in different locations, different departments, all that kind of stuff. You could still be quite siloed. So that's different to
an external partner event or a client event or a prospect event or a trade show or an offsite, whatever that is. I think one of the things that I recall that was so lovely from an event that I went to, there was that collective of like, 400, 500 people, pre-event opening kind of dinner event kind of thing. The best thing was the buddy system. They pre-introduced me to somebody who was really happy to be a buddy and wanted to meet me, but also wanted and I think was tasked with introducing me to at least 3 other people that evening. Like that was their kind of gamification challenge kind of thing. Like introduce Adam to 3 people he doesn't know. And that, when you replicate that with like, I don't know, 50 new faces in the room, that's a lot of new connections in such a short pace of time. And then going into the next day, which is the main day, you're already saying hello to people at breakfast or at the coffee bar, or before you go into that first session, you're kind of even choosing who you might want to sit close to because you're like, I want to continue that conversation we had last night kind of thing. So I think in those conference-led environments, if you've got the ability to kind of do a pre-event cocktails and canapes or something, or a dinner, that's a great way to kind of break the ice for all those new first-timers, to get them to kind of quickly build their network at the event and start to feel much more comfortable about being there.
And those are really important. I'm a big advocate of some of these smaller group activities pre-event. And even when you have a party the night before and maybe you have 100 people there, I've gone to ones where somebody met me at the door who I knew from that particular company, right? But they were the only person I was going to know in the room, right? So I've already worked up my courage, right? That whole introvert thing. I've worked up my courage to walk in the room. They made a point, and I've been to a few of these where they made a point of walking me into the room and saying, oh my gosh, I want you to come and I want you to meet Adam. And this is why, right?
Yeah.
And so now I want you to come and I want you to meet Susie Q. And this is why. Yeah. And so if we can provide that, then we've already set them up for success when they actually hit the event the next day. So it's really important for us to be able to provide that if we can. And one of the things that you said was, someone had a job to introduce you to people, but they were really, like into it. It can't just be like, here's our volunteers, and now they have to go introduce Adam to 3 people. It has to be somebody who's invested in introducing Adam to 3 people.
Absolutely. And we know those people, right? You can see the clear divide on those types of people, the introducers, and they're like, I don't know. Lisa, this has been an amazing conversation. I think you've dropped some real golden nuggets. I've learned stuff today that I'm going to take away to my event. But I've got one final question, just something fun to kind of end the conversation on. What's one event? Well, it's 2 questions. I lied already. I've lied to you already. It's 2 questions. What's one event that you've not been to yet that you would love to go to, and why?
Oh, gosh, there's probably a few. Actually, one that's over in London, I actually have not been to InfoComm yet. And every year I want to go. And it's usually a couple of weeks or 4 weeks right before the big show in Seattle. So
can we explain to the audience listening in case they don't know
what InfoComm is? So in addition to owning 2 businesses, I'm also the executive director of the Northwest Event Show in Seattle, which is an event for the event industry, which is great. So that's definitely a family reunion. But InfoComm's usually about 4 weeks before that show. And the team here freaks out that I could even consider flying overseas, which I'm like, I'm just working. Like, it doesn't matter. I could get hit by a bus just as easily as I could, be in a plane crash. But that one's actually definitely on my list. And I think part of it is just because I haven't been, and I, my event industry family goes, so I want to go. And I actually haven't made it to IMEX Frankfurt yet either. So those are no. So I was hoping to make it this year, but I think 2026. I think I'm going to have to do it because I haven't been yet.
Yeah, this is the challenge, isn't it, of working in the events industry. you're busy at events, working on events, which means you often can't go to all the industry events that you want to go to. Like I've been watching the MPI live stream today. They're in, is it Louisiana, I think, this year? Kind
St.
of thing.
Louis. It's in St.
St. Louis,
Louis.
sorry, St. Louis, yeah. I've just missed the Middle East event show. I've been dying to go to that for like 2 or 3 years. I'm going to have to wait till next year. Again, sitting there on LinkedIn, FOMO from all the pictures that everybody's sharing.
Yep.
Think I'm going to make it out to Saudi event show this year in September. I definitely want to check that out, and that's in my diary and stuff. There's just so many, isn't there? There's just like,
Right.
as an event professional, your list is longer than everybody
You
else.
and I were just talking about the Middle East event show last week because I was like, oh wait, what's this one? I didn't my list, right? But same thing, right? I missed Event Connect last week, I think it was. I'm not at MPI WEC this week because I'm running other events, so I can't be there. And all my friends are there, right? I'm watching the post. Same thing with IMEX Frankfurt. I put a post up the week before. I was like, oh, it's going to be a hard week because I'm going to be watching everybody post, and I'm not there, right? So it's really hard. I just have to figure out how to like live in the US half of the year and live in Europe half of the year, and I'll be great.
That's not a bad shout, that actually split your time.
I'm trying.
If only we could be professional event industry attendees, like that would be the dream, right? Just
like I just want to find somebody to do the house swap whole thing with me, but that means that they're going to want to come to Arizona when it's 45 degrees Celsius here.
I think I'm going to be in the same position as well, Lisa, moving to the Middle East. I don't think anybody's going to want to swap with me June, July, August kind of thing. So yeah. Well, Lisa, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for giving us the honor of spending some time with us to talk about event design, neurodiversity, and a little bit more about your background and how you got started as well. For anybody that doesn't know Lisa, she is the most warm, welcoming, open person I've possibly ever met. So do reach out to her. Don't be a chicken. If you want to talk to Lisa, I'm sure she'll happily take your call or your message. You can connect up with her on LinkedIn, or maybe the next Event Tech Live.
I will be there. So
awesome. Thanks again, Lisa, and we'll see you in the next one.